Welcome back to the Fitness, Wellness, and Longevity Podcast. Today I got to sit down with Jeff Cohen. Jeff Cohen is a businessman, a lawyer, a father. He has many, many hats that he wears. We got to sit down and have an amazing conversation about his life and his new book that he just came out with called The Wolf That Wins. That's available on Amazon.com right now. Guys, if you like this podcast, please consider subscribing, rate, and review, and enjoy the Fitness, Wellness, and Longevity Podcast with Jeff Cohen. Jeff, thank you very much for sitting down with me, man.
Thanks, buddy. This is fun because normally when we talk, we just kind of freestyle, and usually we think we're going to talk about something, and we end up talking about something else for a long time.
You're absolutely right, and I think those are the best conversations, just because when you're prepared for something, it almost is like you're guarded, and you have something canned that you want to talk about, or that some kind of position that you want to defend, and or some kind of this is who I've been, so this is who I have to kind of talk about. And I know a few weeks ago we had talked, and all of a sudden for me personally, I went from a position of coach to holy shit, man, like I got a lot to learn here. You had mentioned in that conversation that you're at a point in your life now where you're like, hey, I'd like to start maybe sharing some of this information that I've accrued over time. Like, what's that experience been like for you?
You know, I noticed there was just a shift. There was just a change that I noticed. There was a drive, an invitation, a feeling like I want to go in this direction, a different direction. And it was a feeling of just wanting to download, share everything that I've been learning and that I continue to learn. And it was just a change I noticed. And it started with lots of invitations and opportunities to have one-on-one conversations. Coffee was a big one. Somebody would say, hey, let's go have some coffee. Or I would feel like, you know, I want to go have coffee with this guy. Like, I had this feeling like he needed to have coffee. And it was typically one-on-one with a guy. And over the course of years, a few years, I just felt like I wanted to have coffee with more guys. So I had a conversation.
What did your wife think about that?
You know, she's always been incredibly supportive. And then I've got this collaborator here, Autumn, and I was talking with her about it. And I'm like, God, I wonder how I can have more coffee with more folks, more guys. And it turned into writing a book. And then it turned into something I know very little about, a blog. And now it turns into podcasts, and it's just opportunities to have conversations with more people.
Why do you think these conversations lead us to new breakthroughs, new ideas? Like, what about the conversation in particular makes it that powerful?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
What a profound answer.
I don't know. But here's something I notice. There was a time in my life when I didn't really talk about what I was thinking, didn't talk about what I was feeling. It was just very kind of mano a mano, solo kind of journey. And then over time, I noticed I was having conversations more with people. And I noticed that in the midst of those conversations, magic happens. Like stuff I didn't know gets really apparent. Stuff that I needed to learn becomes apparent. So I decided that it was really important for me to move my energy by speaking.
And it's interesting because, like, usually it's when we stop having this filter that the real conversation begins. And it almost is like, well, how do I stop that filter? It's like, well, the filter is on when you're trying to figure out how to turn the filter off. And it's almost like the more you immerse yourself in the conversation, the more the flow takes over. Is that kind of what you've found in these conversations that you've done so far?
Yeah, I just noticed that it's really important to speak. Things that I need to know become apparent. Things that I didn't know become apparent. And it happens in this collaborative thing with another person. And it's just magical and powerful and important.
It definitely feels like a dance. Like it's you need a participant in this who is feeling the music the same way as you are. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because there was a part of my life where I was really more living, moving on my own. It was a very internal kind of experience, and that served a purpose. And then life really opened up and became a lot more powerful, meaningful, rewarding by just speaking with people.
How do you, at this point, because I mean, well, before we even go there, can we give a little background as to how you are at this point in your journey? I mean, it seems like you're a very learned man. It seems like you have tons of life experience. I think within about 30 seconds of talking to you, you can see that this guy has a lot of mastery in certain areas.
Thank you.
And, you know, how did this, like, I guess, what events led you to this point? Like, what are these big landmark things in your life? What are those reference points that those high watermarks that you have that have kind of led you to this point, sitting down in this conversation?
Suffering. Suffering. You know, and that's really true. I mean, since I was a kid, I just had this incredible self-judgment, and it was always negative. It was a very, very active voice in my head, constantly criticizing and, you know, not measuring up. And it was just a feeling of a lot of suffering, you know, since I was a child. And it, at some point, and I don't remember when, but I think I was a young teenager, I just said, you know, if I can at least learn something from this, then it won't be for naught. Then it won't just be suffering. So I became an incredibly curious person. And I began kind of seeking answers and insights and relief. And that journey turned into trying this and trying that and experiencing this, all of it to get relief from the suffering that I felt, which was essentially massive amounts of self-judgment and feeling completely like I don't measure up.
So it almost seems like the suffering becomes your guide. Your pain
Absolutely.
is the roadmap to getting where you
Absolutely.
think you need to be.
That was the invitation. I mean, at the time, it was something to be relieved from. Over the course of many years, it became the source of tremendous gifts, tremendous journeys, stories, emergences, and now at this time of my life, just sharing it with everyone that wants to hear it.
Invitations is something that you've used a couple times in this conversation thus far. Can you talk more about how you have shifted from trying to force life versus finding invitations?
Yeah, I became aware that life is something to be listened to, that it's constantly giving direction and guidance in what I call invitations. And I certainly didn't navigate that way in my younger years. It was me, and it was all on me, and it was all in my head, and I had to kind of figure it out. And I didn't realize at all and didn't experience that there was this thing that we can call life that's communicating with me, that's telling me things, that's inviting me to things. And over the course of many years, I began to kind of look for signs and signals, is what I would call them.
How do you know it's a sign versus you trying to force something? You know what I mean? Like, oh, I really want this outcome, so I'm going to make that's the sign. Oh, that person said this to me, I'm going to take that as a sign. Versus like those clear cut, oh, wait a second. Even though I might not want this, this is what life is showing me right now. Is it just experience that allows you to do that? Or are there certain kinds of things you look for in particular that allow you to say, well, this is the path of least resistance?
It's a feeling. The thing has a certain kind of quality, a certain feel to it. And you know, and the truth is, I don't know, right? I mean, do I know it's a sign? No, I don't know it's a sign. But I get to make the story up. So I get to make the meaning up. So I like the story of certain things have a certain quality and have a certain invitation to follow. And following those journeys creates often some pretty epic and heroic stories that were valuable for me, but became even more valuable when I realized they weren't for me. They're for anybody that I can share them with.
And nice little segue into your recently or upcomingly released, depending on when this podcast comes out, book.
Yeah, right.
Is entitled "The Wolf That Wins."
Right.
This is your first book, right?
It is.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I kind of hesitate to ask, but I have to. How long did it take for you to write this book?
Years. I felt a number of times along this journey that I had something to share that that I thought would be valuable, especially for younger men in their teens, 20s, 30s. What it was like for me to go through those years and to come through something that felt like a fulfillment of that journey. What would it be like to share that? Would it be helpful for other men, especially other men? So I felt the call, if you will, or the invitation to do it for a long, long time. And I just thought, well, I don't know how to write a book. But more importantly, I don't know that anybody wants to hear these freaking stories, I mean, that was my first reaction. Is like, anybody want to read this? I don't know. And I certainly don't know how to write them because I'm not a writer, is, what I thought. So there was this invitation in my head, of like, you should really share this shit. And then as I went through my life and it became more about what I was, the value that I was giving as opposed to the value that I was deriving, my life's trajectory kind of led me, and the timing was right. Go ahead and just kind of tell stories and then see if I can find the book in the stories, which is ultimately what I ended up doing.
That's a nice way to think about it, is just how you put that. So obviously there was a shift from a me place to like, who's going to want to listen to me versus how am I able to serve better?
Exactly.
Right.
That's exactly what happened. And so it just became a practice, and the experience was just get it out, just dump out the stories, and then see what I could find in that process that other people might find helpful. And in the process of doing it, I ended up writing the book that I wished I had when I was a young man. Because my experience was I'm on my own trying to figure this shit out, and it's freaking hard. And I didn't know anybody like me. And I didn't know anybody that had the thoughts and the feelings that I had. So that made it much more difficult. So I was hoping, and still hope, that in telling these stories in the form of this book, that other guys go, there I am. It's normal. There's a connection. There's a community. There's a trajectory. There's a normal course of life that I'm part of.
Yeah, that definitely speaks to me. While I was in school at university, I sound so British when I say that, but when I was in college, one of my favorite books and my all-time favorite books was Into the Wild. And it highlighted this guy, Chris McCandless, who leaves university and he's like, what the hell do I do with my life? So he has this trust and, spoiler alert, he goes on this large journey and kind of finds himself in the process, yet kind of loses himself in the process. And that I go back to. And he renamed himself Alexander Supertramp at some point in his journey. Through your journey, did you redefine yourself based upon your experiences that you had done that far?
Oh, yeah.
And was there a reconnection with the original self?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question. The short answer is yes. I mean, I was the wounded guy. I was the wounded guy. And in the course of my journey, I became the hero. And then I became everyone. And what that means is I really identified with the suffering that I was experiencing. And I was really on the hunt for relief. And I was trying this and I was trying that, and it led me here and it led me there. And it was really about chasing that suffering out. And ultimately, one of the things that I discovered was my self-judgment was in my way. And I noticed a certain linearity to the culture of healing and the culture of wholeness and the culture of masculinity. And I noticed that my experience really wasn't so much about linearity as it was about the wholeness of it. That the things that chased me are the things that pushed me, are the things that ultimately I embraced and that I found commonality and connection in. So there is this kind of fulfillment of the journey at this point in my life where, I'm the guy that wants to help people see, hey, that linearity is off target. Yeah, there isn't this destination. There isn't this pristine kind of perfection. There is only this beautiful fucking humanness. And that's really what awaits us, is the embrace of that and the embrace of the complexity and the duality of that whole experience.
It almost sounds, instead of a linear thing, it's almost like a cyclical thing. We find something that rubs us the wrong way. We seek something to alleviate that suffering. And in the process, we realize, wait a second, I'm back to the beginning again in terms of, okay, I found something new that is, and in the process, I've shed my skin, I've become this new person. And now I'm like, oh, now I know everything again. And then I start to feel that feeling again. Oh, wait a second, I feel suffering again. Is that something that, as selfishly, does that ever go away?
No, it doesn't go away. Nor should it. I mean, it's a little bit, it's a kind of a funny question. It's like, when am I going to be a human being without the characteristics of being fucking human? And the truth is, you're not. You're not. And it's there for a purpose, and it's there for a reason. All of that self-judgment, all of that mental activity is meant for survival. And that fear that feeds the mind is essential for physical and psychological survival. It's to be embraced. It has a message. It has a wisdom to it. It's just not all there is, And so, I remember most of my life, in those kind of healing years where I'm chasing healing and something that I thought was an end state. That I'm going to become something like Spock. I'm going to be full of wisdom, and I'm going to be free from the pain of being a human being. That's really what I was after. And it was really only in the embrace of that pain and the embrace of the suffering that I found relief from it. I stopped chasing it.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting how you describe this, and I juxtapose it to where I am in my journey, because obviously I had enough suffering in my life through years and years that I've got to a point where I said, wait a second, some way, by manipulating the external and by trying to achieve, this hasn't gotten me what I wanted it. Right. And I always had that thought in my mind, if I got this, then things would finally be my way. Did you have anything that you got to that point where you're like, wait a second, this just isn't working the way I thought it would, and started maybe going a new way?
Yeah. I remember a time I was I had been exposed to shamanism, and I found this teacher, and we had this 3-year course of learning shamanism and being exposed. And it was kind of like spiritual boot camp. It was tough. It was hard. It was challenging. I was the retard in the class. I was the worst guy in the class. I had no natural skills, no natural ability. I knew nothing about energy. Never would have used that word. I didn't understand about anything. I came from a very kind of physical, linear kind of background, and there was really nothing spiritual about me. So here I am, kind of following the next 50 feet in front of me, and then driving the next 50 feet and the next 50 feet. And here I am in this shaman training gig that I don't even know how you pronounce it. Is it shaman? Is it shaman? I don't really know anything about it. But here I am, and that's my journey, and I'm in the midst of it. And at some point, I realized that at the end of this 3-year intensive training, I still felt burdened. by my own mind. I've still felt burdened by chasing the healing, you know, and I had this awareness or inspiration at the end of that period. You know what? Just go eat fucking ice cream. Just stop chasing it. And I put it down. I just stopped pursuing it for the first time in years. And not just shamanism. Shamanism was kind of the last part of that journey where I just said, I can't keep after this. I can't keep doing this. So I put it down. And literally would just go eat ice cream. And I would just go hang out. And I would stop pursuing the thing that couldn't get caught. This belief of relief, this belief of wholeness, this belief of the end of suffering. I just took my foot off the gas. And I replaced it with having fun, being present, but not that chase. And I don't know, 6 months into that process, somebody said, hey, what got you into shamanism? Somebody asked me. And I said, suffering. And I started to describe the story of how it felt to be me most of my life that got me into, ultimately shamanism. And I stopped midway and I said, oh my God. And she said, what? I said, it's gone. And she said, well, what do you mean? That constant voice of self-judgment and criticism, it was like a bad house guest. And it went out the back door. It didn't tell me it was leaving, and it didn't leave a note. And I hadn't had those thoughts or feelings for months. Months. I didn't even notice it until I got asked this question. So it was a big shift, and it was a big lesson for me. Sometimes there's a teaching somewhere, and I don't know where I heard it, that what is sought cannot be attained. That the thing that's being sought depends for its survival on you seeking it. So there's always this gap between where I was and where it is. It has to be over there, and I have to be here away from it. This wholeness, this relief. It depended on my pursuit of it for it to exist. That whole dynamic, needed me to do what I was doing, chase it. And I stopped chasing it, and it poofed. It just went away.
So my analytical mind jumps to, okay, we have this perspective of suffering at a younger age, but we couldn't go right from there to be like, well, I'm just going to let go of life. No big deal. No. Right? You couldn't do that then.
Right.
That makes sense?
Oh, yeah.
So I guess the cycle becomes we are aware. We go on our journey where we can go as far as we can. And then we get to the point where we go, well, this is it. We got to let go of the wheel and we just got to let life live. Right. And you got to enjoy your life. Does that resonate with you?
It does. And there isn't an escape from the human experience. I mean, even writing this book, I'm thinking, hey, this is going to help some people. This is going to be great. They won't suffer like I suffered. And I'm going, is that a good thing? I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. Is it, these challenges that we all have as human beings that we respond to create these breakthroughs and these heroic stories and these moments of convincing ourselves how magical and powerful and strong and persistent and committed and blessed we are. So how do you get that? I think you get it the way that we get it.
So experience ends up being the biggest teacher in the end, instead of trying to take a shaman class or whatever. Those will give you the guidelines, but until you actually put it into practice and go through the experiences and feel the things you need to feel, those things are just words on a paper.
I think so. I think that, at least if my own journey so far is representative of what humans go through to grow and transform, and there's nothing like direct experience. There's nothing like direct experience. I mean, have I read some great books? Yes. Have I seen some great inspiring things? Yes. Will I continue to? I will. And getting it in my body through experience is irreplaceable. And it's an essential part of the human journey.
Are there daily practices that you do to put yourself in the position you are right now, where it seems you're very present, you are self-aware, and you are almost part of life, not trying to stop the flow of it? Are there daily practices that you have that kind of put you in that place that you've accumulated over the years?
There used to be a lot more do this, like this, in a more kind of like ritualistic manner. There was, meditations and prayers and practices and rituals. And now it's more a function of staying curious. It's more a function of really two things: staying curious and asking myself, how can I be helpful? Those are really the two things that drive me most in my life.
Now, a younger person may say, okay, I'm just going to do those things all the time. What is your response to that?
I think everybody has an innate instinct and intuition about what they need to be doing and what the invitation that life has for them. There's that thing in front of them that they're either following or they're pushing off. I feel like I should go to church. I feel like I should, go on this vacation to Guatemala. I feel compelled to start a workout program. I feel like, what's right for me is to end this relationship or to start this relationship. We all know those things. I mean, just innately. And I think that life is constantly speaking to us. Our answers are right in front of our nose. The question is, are you answering the invitation? It's easy to pray for guidance. And I think on some level, whether you're religious or you're spiritual and you like the word prayer or not, everybody on some level prays for guidance. And that's an easy thing to do. Here's what's not easy to do. Step off. When there is that, this might be an answer. This might be, we have these plans, we have these agendas, and it has to be this way. And, and yet life will disagree with us, and life will put something right in front of us. I've got to be at this meeting at this certain time, and yet the traffic is backed up, and you're pissed, and you're frustrated, and you're sure you're failing, and you're sure you're not going to be the person that you want to be because you're not going to be fucking on time, and yet you get there and it's the perfect time. And there's this movie you want to go to, and it's sold out, and you're pissed, and then you end up having coffee with somebody that's the best freaking coffee you've ever had. So I think life, one of my cosmologies, one of the stories I tell myself that I love, life has a much better fucking idea than I do.
So, for me, as I hear that, I go, okay, so, I think my thing as I start to pick this up is I live by extremes. Like, okay, I'm going to meditate all the time versus, okay, I'm throwing it out. I'm doing crack and hookers all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like, we don't have that sweet spot. Do you find that it's the fact that you've gone through this for decades that have given you I now have the wisdom to know that a tomato is a fruit, but it doesn't belong in a fruit salad?
I'm a lot more respectful of what life is showing me than I am my own ideas about what things should be and how things should be. It makes me a lot more flexible. It makes me a lot more receptive. It makes me a lot more curious, and it allows me to have a lot more fun.
So I also, as you talked about, kind of taking it off the gas a little bit, do you also, once you have that wisdom, being able to have the strength to actually follow through with action, is that part of this whole process as well?
Yeah, it is. But I think that, I was having a conversation with my stepson, periodically off and on, and we're talking about being a boy versus being a man, and I'm like, boys do what they feel like. Men do the right thing. So there's this differentiation that happens in our life cycle as human beings. And it's not just boys or men, it's human beings. But when we're younger, we're navigating based on how shit feels. Mm. This is going to feel good. This is going to feel bad. I'll stay away from shit that feels bad. I'm going to go closer to the shit that feels good. But when we get older, the way things feel in that regard, pain, pleasure, becomes not necessarily irrelevant, but not the navigational beacon. It's not that. You develop a code of what's right and what's wrong. You develop a code of what's serving you and serving others. And you walk that walk. Or put another way, I have never once felt like working out. Not once. Not once. I don't feel like waking up at 4:30 in the morning and getting to the gym at 5:30 and 6, even though I do it 4 days a week and I have for many, many years. I've never once felt like doing that. It's never been a pleasant thought. Never. And yet I do it. Why? It's the right thing.
So doing the right thing almost gets ingrained into the nervous system now, and it almost feels weird when you're not doing the right thing.
Yeah. I mean, and I think we all know that, but it's a little bit like working on a muscle, We have this pain-pleasure awareness, which is really, really big for us when we're young. And we're doing things that aren't serving us, but they're pleasurable, and we're avoiding the things that are unpleasant. I just had this conversation with my stepson as well. It's like, here's the recipe for, at his stage of life. He's 17 years old. And I'm like, here's what it is. Do the shit that you don't feel like doing and don't fucking quit. That's the recipe. But I mean, as people with responsibilities and we're adults, whether we're women and we've got kids or we're husbands and we've got wives and children and families and work, we're used to that. My dad was a soldier. He would wake up on the weekends after he'd worked 6 days, in his pharmacy, and he's painting the house and he's cutting down limbs and dragging them, not for an hour, like all day. And I'm helping him. And he never once complained. And he never once voiced any kind of ambivalence about doing that. It was the right thing to do. So he showed me, right? This is what it looks like to do the right thing. Just do the right thing.
Now, how did that influence you now? And do you look at him as a person who say, wow, that was success to me? There was, and I guess that's a separate conversation, and maybe even a separate question. Like, how did you see him? Did you see him as someone that wow, that's the template? Or is it more like, I like pieces of this, but maybe not some other ones?
That's a good question. It changed over the years. I would say that when I was young, it was just a pain in the ass, and he and I didn't talk, and I didn't know what he was thinking or feeling. And so there was that kind of distance. But he was a big man and I was a little boy, and he modeled for me what it looks like to be a soldier for your family. Did I know that at the time? Of course not. I wanted to go play with the kids. I didn't want to fucking drag trees. I didn't want to go dust bottles at his pharmacy. I didn't want to go stand on a stool and run a cash register. And yet that's what made me. I remember driving back from the office one day, and I got him on the phone. I'm like, Dad, because I remember what he told me when I was probably a teenager and emotional. I was a really emotional guy as a teenager. And I said, I remember when he told me, when I have a problem with your mom, or I've got this problem, or I've got, what I do? And I'm like, no, I don't know what you do. I go to work. And I thought, this poor bastard, he's not taking care of his shit. He's not, stepping up, and, he's not doing life the way I think he should, because I fucking knew better when I was 16 than he did as a grown man. And And I'm driving back from work, and I'm like, I just want to let you know I remember you telling me that, and I think you're a fucking genius. You know, because he understood about, about grounding himself, and he understood about the rituals of service that he's created in his life that create balance and create fulfillment. And he was right.
Wow. So how is that received years later? Because obviously we want to talk to the guy who is then and there.
Yeah.
And we want to reconcile that, because you obviously felt a little bit of like judgment and guilt for being 16 years old and saying, oh, you should be doing this, and then realizing it now. Yeah. How is it received, and how do you feel now in that kind of instance?
Great. I mean, he received it great. But my dad and I, he's 86 or 87, I've forgotten. And he and I have been able, especially in my adult years, to connect and talk about some very difficult things, and about the things that I needed to talk about since I was a kid, and that I got to take to him, and he got to listen to, and so we had the fulfillment of that kind of relationship. And he, in fact, it was just life-changing to be able to have that engagement with him.
Yeah, and we kind of feel sometimes that's like in the moment, we want it right now and here, but we don't realize that, like, again, life doesn't play like that. No. You will learn the lesson when you need to learn the lesson.
Exactly.
And in this instance, when you're ready. Because exactly. I imagine if you were to go back in time and tell that 16-year-old version of yourself, well, he's actually doing it because this is his path and this is what's for him, you would be like, I don't want to listen to that. No. Even if you are from the future and you are me.
No. And I think it's a point that we all confront, and then we judge the shit out of ourselves. It's like, how come I didn't know yesterday what I know today? And the truth is, nobody knows yesterday what they know today. That's not how humans work. That's not how we grow. It's not the trajectory of our lives. We don't know shit. We have experiences, and then we know shit. Which is, one of the things that was really shaping for me is I saw this interview. Bill Moyers was interviewing a Jungian psychologist. I'll remember his name in a minute. And he was explaining these human archetypes. And one of the archetypes that he explained had to do with the hero. And it just, there were seeds. I didn't understand the Campbell. God, I'm drawing.
Joseph Campbell?
Joseph Campbell, thank you. Anyway, so I'm watching this interview that he has with Joseph Campbell, and the communication was, here's what the hero's cycle looks like. The hero goes and confronts the dragon, kills the dragon, learns things from killing the dragon, and takes those lessons back to his or her community, and then does it again and again and again and again. I didn't understand the significance of that when I heard it, but essentially what I've come to be instructed by and really inspired by is that story. That essentially those engagements, those invitations of life, and then those engagements, and then what you learn from them and the value derived from them, it's not for you. It's for your community. It's for your mom and dad. It's for your kids. It's for your coworkers. It's for the people around you that need those stories, that didn't have that particular journey or didn't have that particular engagement, but you did. So you become kind of a conduit. And for me, it's one of the most honorable stories of service and how humans are of service to each other, that hero cycle.
Do you feel at this point that you are the hero of your own journey, or are you kind of in the middle of it still, or will you ever be?
Yes and yes. I mean, I'm always learning, and I'm always finding ways to become a more what I choose to be. One of the great things about life is that for me, it's really been about getting to a point where I embrace and love myself and everybody around me more than I ever did. And that's not done. And that I don't know that that's ever done. So I find times and places in my life where I feel like stepping up and being of service, and times where I drop the ball and say, no, I don't feel like it. Sometimes it's the right thing to do because I need a break or I need to take care of me. And sometimes I'm just being snotty, you know?
In which case, that's a learning experience too. Like, hey, this was my response to this.
Exactly.
I chose to be a bit of a immature here.
Right.
That was what they gave me back. Do I want to experience that again?
Exactly.
Redo the cycle.
Exactly. So the cycle becomes not a state, but a beacon. So that hero cycle becomes a path. And sometimes that's my path. Does it mean that I walk it all the time? It does not. But it calls me back. And so when I step off, I notice it, I feel it, I take accountability for it, and then I get back on it. It's my path.
Before I mentioned success, and you know, in regards to you looking at your dad then, how do you define success in this life? And let's say, obviously, it's very easy to put that to a successful musician or successful, lawyer. I win all my cases. I'm successful. But in life in general, how do you define success? I know that's not an easy thing, but like, what are some of your concepts that you go to in terms of like, hey, if I want to live a successful life, I need these things, or I need to accomplish this, or I need to be in this state of mind. What do those look like?
It's answering the call. Answering the call. So, and I think it takes different forms with different people, and I don't think there's a right answer. It's really feeling for me that life is inviting me to certain things, and I am stepping in and I'm saying yes. That's really what success means. So, and it takes every conceivable form. It means being a business owner when I never had that in mind, and forming a business. It means being a husband when I didn't know I was going to do that again after I got divorced from my kid's mom. It means being a friend in a way that I didn't know how to be. It means being a leader in a way that I never heard of before, but now I'm inspired to do that. It means having money that I never thought was important to me. It means driving a car that's really fun and I never thought. So it's like, what does fulfillment look like, you know? And in the natural world, it's easy to see. Like, you see the seed, and in the seed is the potential for whatever that thing, that seed could be, you know? And in the natural world, it becomes this tree with these flowers and this fruit, and that's the fulfillment of the potential of that seed. So success is the same for me. It's finding the things as I go through life that I'm really inspired to learn or do or become, and I say yes.
Now, to a younger person, and obviously this is kind of who you're speaking to now in terms of lending some experience and lending some life lessons to, what would be your recommendations? And obviously you have some younger kids who are definitely different parts of their journey. What are your recommendations to them in finding success in their lives?
You know, I told my kids this story a lot when they were growing up about driving 50 feet. When I was a young guy, I was really pissed off around people that knew what they wanted to do and they knew what their calling was, and because I freaking knew nothing. I'm like, in fact, my strategy for life was not to get in it, because I didn't think I would measure up. So I'm like, here's the strategy. Don't play. You can't lose if you don't play. I'm not fucking playing. And then I had this whole strategy and this whole philosophy about why I was better than everybody else, because I'm not in the sandbox. I wasn't in it. You know, that was my strategy. As I got older and I began to feel invited to certain engagements, like, oh, I guess I'm going to law school. I never knew that. Never thought of that. And then I go there and law school sucks after the first semester. And I'm like, I'm going to complete law school. I'm one foot in front of the other. In 3 years, you have a law degree. Because I navigated so much like that in my life, I told my kids, look, you can drive from New York to California, pitch black at night. And they're like, you can't see California from New York, but you can go to California from New York, pitch black at night. And I said, you want to know how? They're like, yeah. I said, just turn your headlights on, just drive 50 feet. And then you'll see the next 50 feet. And then you'll see the next 50 feet. So just keep driving the 50 feet that you see, and it creates a life. Now, some people, they can see 100 feet or 500 feet. I mean, I remember in high school, the kids that wanted to be something, a lawyer or a doctor or a whatever. And I just thought, how the hell did they do that? I couldn't see anything. I didn't realize it was because I was doing this. But in terms of success, navigating success, do the thing that you're inspired to do. Do it. Don't talk yourself out of it. Don't get so complicated with the details that that you're overwhelmed and you're shut down. Do the thing that inspires you and frightens you. Do it. And then you'll find the next thing.
So at the time when you were like, I don't know what I want to do with my life, because I mean, I come across those people all the time, and they look at me because, you know, I'm into fitness, I have a gym, all that kind of stuff. They assume I know what I want to do with my life. I'm like, I'm still trying to figure it out. Even though I'm in the gym, having fun, talking to people, I sit there, I'm like, is this the right thing? Like in the beginning where you were trying to find that first 50 feet, what was your motivation and what was your guidance to find that first 50 feet?
It was being honest with myself. It was being honest. I was 21 years old, and I remember this very well. And I was off the grid, and I was a hippie kid, and I wasn't going to play the game of life. And I'm sleeping on a bedroll, and I have 2 shirts and 2 pair of pants, and that's my life. And I'm sharing a house in Arizona with a couple guys, and I'm not having this whole society thing. That's not my thing. I'm not into it. I'm not having it. I had no idea why I was doing it. I thought I was just better than everybody else. That's how I had painted that picture. And I woke up one morning, and I realized, you know, the effort that I'm putting into not joining life is not fucking sustainable. And I have the kind of ego that requires me to go become something that society says, oh, that's a something, which at the time I thought meant being a writer. But the point is, it was just this moment of undeniable honesty. I'm sitting on the floor, and I have all the accoutrements of the philosophy of my life, which is don't fucking show up and stay outside the sandbox. That was and then there was that moment of, shit, I'm not that guy. I wanted to be that guy, but I really wasn't that guy. I was somebody else. I was the guy that really needed to become something. And in that moment, it was the first time in my entire life that I saw it and that I told myself that.
Where did you find the strength from there to go, okay, it's time for me to take that next step?
I decided.
And it's as simple as that. Like, I am now doing this. There is no behind me. Right. There is only this step.
That's right. I had dropped out of college. I did abysmally bad the first year. I wasn't ready. It wasn't my thing. So here I am 3 years later, sleeping on a bedroll in this house. And I have this awakening or this awareness, this epiphany, if you will. And I go, all right, I'm going back to college. Like that.
So it was just that intention. And then you go, okay, what's the next step?
That's exactly right. And I knew right then it meant I got to go to college. For me, it was like, I'm going to go become that something. And the next 50 feet in front of me, you're going to go back to college. And I figured, I didn't know what that would translate into, what the degree was, or I just knew I'm going back to college and I'm going to work and I'm going to pay for it. And that's what I'm going to do.
Now, most people, when they make that decision, they take one step and they start to feel a pushback in terms of, okay, you're going to have to figure something out, or you're going to have to suck at something, or, you know, whatever hurdle might be in the way. Mm-hmm. What is your response to that? Because I know a lot of people like, oh, I'm going back to college. And they go, okay, so, you know, it's 2 weeks later. Okay, so what have you done so far? Well, I was supposed to set up an appointment with the guidance counselor there, but I just don't want to drive down to FAU or whatever it is. You know what I mean? Like, what is your response to that? Because inevitably you're going to come with some kind of pushback that is going to cause some kind of resistance that makes you have to transform and learn or change.
Right.
Like how do we move from there?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we just do it. It's that simple. I mean, I remember.
Don't think, just do.
Just fucking do it.
Yeah.
You know, it's that simple. And it's not like you get a trophy if you do and you get, chastised if you don't. But if you don't step up into the challenge that's inviting you, you're not going to win. And winning is what you get on the other side of the challenge. It could be, wow, look at me. Wow, I'm special. Wow. It could mean, I'm really equipped to help people and I wasn't before. It could, but the point is, in front of every challenge, on the other side of it is a gift you can't imagine, and it's great every time. Which is one of the reasons why, as a parent, I talk a lot with people about parenting. I've got 3 children of my own. My wife has 2. And we've, 4 kids through, and we've got a teenager left. Anyway, we talk a lot about parenting amongst ourselves and with our friends or other people. And it's like, look, the human life cycle, the human growth cycle looks like this. Confront the challenge, push through the challenge, grow. Find the next challenge, push through that challenge, grow. And parents, especially, it seems like in our culture or at this time, have this tendency to shield children from challenges. Like pain is bad, challenges are bad. And yet it's the only thing that propels us. So every time you step in the way between a challenge and your child or a friend or a loved one, you're depriving them the gift of going through the challenge and finding what's on the other side. And it's always something powerful.
A lot of the people that I encounter will meet a challenge, and it's hard for them because maybe they don't have enough reference points yet to be like, okay, challenges are normal.
Right.
So when we're talking about adolescents who haven't had enough reference points, and when they get to a challenge, they go, oh, I'm just going to hang out with my friends, or I'm going to go back to something comfortable, etc. I mean, how do we do that? Because we don't want to necessarily force people into it because, we take away that learning experience. You look at there was a thought of helicopter parents back in the day where they say, okay, we're going to say, now they call it lawnmower parents, where they actually just cut down the grass in front of them to make it so easy, right?
Yes.
They take away those challenges. Yeah. How do you find that balance between the two?
Yeah, it's tricky, right? I mean, one of the things that's clear to parents is we have that tension in ourselves between wanting to protect and nurture, which is kind of a feminine form of love, which is normal and prolific when you're dealing with young children. But when children get to this age, and it's different for everybody, but it tends to be somewhere between 9 and 11, you see the emergence of the part of them that actually seeks challenges and creates them. Unconsciously, you'll see they're getting in fights, or they're having trouble in a class, or they're actually creating challenges unconsciously. And why are they doing it? Because that's how humans grow. That's how humans grow. So as as a parent, a good question to ask is, when you go to, quote, help your child, are you doing that for them or are you doing that for you? A lot of the times when we think we're helping, we're just making ourselves feel better. We're not helping them at all.
Yeah, I've heard, actually, there's he's a psychiatrist and doctor from British Columbia. His name is Dr. Gabor Mate, who talks about how we are almost recreating the scenarios that we've had, and we are unable to kind of rectify those things because we wouldn't want to do that to our little selves, or that's how we were treated when we were younger. So, I want to eat a piece of chocolate. I don't want to discipline you because when I was a kid, I wanted to have, oh yeah, here, take the chocolate. You know what I mean? So
absolutely.
I guess in the process of having kids too, it is an opportunity for us to say, okay, we can heal ourselves because they're a direct reflection of us anyway. And I guess you can extrapolate that even further to relationships in general of people.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, I think, that question of, am I doing this for my kid or am I doing it for us, doing it for myself?
Yeah.
It's a great question to ask. And I think, one of the things that somebody once communicated to me when I was parenting teenagers, because that was the most challenging time of my parenting experience. It was normal and natural for me to be in the nurturing part of parenting, young kids, and making it enjoyable and creative and fun, and that was effortless. But it wasn't effortless to move into the next phase of parenting, which is preparing human beings to live without me. And somebody, actually two people I remember, communicating in different ways and in different words. Look, your job is to prepare these kids to fucking leave you and be successful and problem solve on their own without you. And it changed everything.
So what was your response?
I wasn't having as much fun with my kids, I'll tell you that. Yeah. And I turned more into police officer and more into the boundary maker and keeper. And I was very strict. I became very strict with my parents, with my kids, to the point where my mother was critical. She's like, Jesus, you're so tough with these kids. I'm like, I'm giving them what they need. I'm giving them what they need. And that's a good point. Are you giving people what they need or are you giving them what they want? As a culture, we see a lot of that too. We get pissed off with politicians that lie and yet we train them because we put them in office and we keep them in office based on just tell me what I want to hear. Not don't tell me what I need to hear. Nobody gets elected to office by being told, tell me what you think I need to hear, even though I'm not going to like it, even though I may not elect you, even though I may not keep you in office. Well, it's the same kind of thing in parenting. We owe it to our children to tell them what they need to hear and to do for them what they need so that they can emerge as an independent, self-sufficient, problem-solving adult. They need that, and that's on us. And so we create these stories. One of the funniest stories I've heard is this idea that there's this new kind of human being. Maybe you've heard about it. Brand new life form just came here, apparently planted here by like aliens. And they're defective. They live in their parents' houses. They have no ambition. They're called millennials. They're not human. They're just put here by another fucking race. And I'm going, I don't think human beings became different. I think we stopped doing the job and then we freaking blame them and we label them. I've got 3 kids. They all pay their bills. They all have engagements in life. They all have relationships. It's the same thing that I went through.
Yeah. I think myself being a millennial, I can speak to that. My parents weren't forcing me to do anything. I think verbally, I think that's a big thing. Like you have to do this, and they weren't overly. I think for me personally, I think what I saw and felt from my parents is what I gravitated toward. My father was very similar to your father in the fact that I don't think he ever called out a day in his life. Never. Would never take vacations. We don't know what that is. And guess what? How often do I take a vacation? Almost never. I have to, I get to the point where people are like, get the hell out of here. You got to go away for a week, right? But yeah. I think that, what we are is what kids pick up on. And as a coach and hopefully one day as a parent, that is what I'm preparing myself for right now, because it's one thing to tell your kid, you need to do this. Yeah. But if you're doing a 180 and completely not following through with what you are trying to teach, then what are they really learning? And I think that's something that this day and age, we take a look at and we go, oh, wait a second, maybe that's why millennials aren't listening. Maybe it's because we're hearing this, but then you turn around and you're on your phone for 2 hours flipping through shit. You're going to a job that you don't like. You're not following through with the relationships and all that kind of thing. And you're telling me to do that? Well, sorry, I'm going to do things something a little bit differently than you. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So that being said, you do have some kids now, and you've how old's your oldest?
My kids are 29, 27 this month, and 23.
And you have a stepson that's 17?
17.
So,
and another one that's 36.
So you've got this huge, differences in ages. And obviously in the last, let's say 10 years, the advent of technology has significantly changed the game in terms of parenting. I mean, you look at, the incidences of depression, especially amongst females nowadays in those early teens, it's epidemic proportions in terms of this idea that they're not enough, et cetera, et cetera. How does technology change the game? And you've seen it. You've seen it in the time that you've been a parent.
I missed that wave. My kids came on into their teen years at a point when that technology it hadn't really crested. So I didn't see my children absorbed in technology. They missed it. But I wasn't a fan, so we had very, clear boundaries around all of that kind of stuff. And we had an understanding that those phones belong to me, and I check them to make sure that they're safe. So those kids, I looked at their phones, and my wife monitored the Facebook of one of my kids, and I monitored because we felt like our job was to help them be safe and protect them. It's one of the ways that we protected our kids. So we didn't have a household where the children had the same rights as the adults. No, they were accountable to us, and I'm sure they had all kinds of feelings about it. In fact, they've let me know, as they're adults. But we felt like we had a specific job to do for them, and so we did it, regardless of what they thought about it. They weren't allowed really to articulate too much about how they felt about that because we weren't interested in that conversation. It's like, look, we got a job to do. I would always explain it. Look, my job is to help you stay safe and stay out of jail and help you stay on track with what's important to you so that you can go where you want to go. And that involves me doing this. And we're not going to talk about that anymore. I'm just going to let you know because that's what's going to happen. I'll be looking at your phone.
I love it. And, we are coming up on that time here. We'll wrap things up a little bit, though, Jeff. Just a quick reminder: The Wolf That Wins is going to be out probably by the time this podcast, and we can get that on Amazon.com.
Yep.
If we need to get a hold of you, also there, Jeff. I know you have a website, right?
Yeah, jefflcohen.com.
Yep.
Yeah.
The last thing I like to always ask, or sometimes ask those that I interview is, and it's very apropos in terms of what, the overall message is here. If there was one thing that you could sit down and tell your, let's say, 16, 17-year-old version of yourself, one piece of advice to take with him through his years, what would that be?
You got this. You got this. You got this. Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. And that's a great place to wrap up here, guys. Thank you very much, Jeff, for your time.
Thanks, man.
Hey, man, I think we have a lot. I wish I had more time. I would have, we've spent 2-3 hours here, but I would love to sit down, maybe wrap with you again. And I really appreciate your time, man.
Thanks,
Thank you.
buddy.
I appreciate
really appreciate it, man.
Yeah. Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.